Besides its written legal system, North Korea is also governed by an extremely tight network of unspoken rules. These aren't printed or publicly posted, but they wield significant influence over every aspect of social life. Just a misstep in communication, an insensitive gesture, or behaving too naturally according to Western customs will instantly freeze the atmosphere. No one will argue or warn you, but silence and an invisible distance will immediately prevail. For locals, adhering to these unspoken rules is a survival skill honed from childhood, repeated until it becomes a natural reflex. Therefore, when tourists inadvertently break this order, the discomfort is usually immediate and direct. Here are 15 taboo areas in cultural etiquette that you absolutely must be aware of to avoid causing offense in this country. Number 1. The culture of worshiping the image of leaders. In North Korea, there's one thing people pay extreme attention to. Your attitude when interacting with symbols of the leadership is considered the most important measure of morality. The issue isn't about words, but about your body language in the moments you're facing these images or statues. To outsiders, they might be inanimate objects, but to locals, they are spaces demanding the highest level of solemnity. A slouching posture, hands in pockets, or an inappropriate smirk are all considered serious offenses. No one will tell you, but the crowd's gaze will turn cold, and conversation will immediately slow down. Even accidentally folding a newspaper with a leader's picture in half can get you into serious trouble, as the fold must never cut across their face. This strictness isn't simply political, it's a deeply ingrained code of conduct. They grew up in an environment that revered discipline, so respect is taken for granted. Therefore, small actions like standing with your back to a monument or taking photos in an unprofessional manner make them feel culturally uncomfortable. In North Korea, respect is sometimes not expressed verbally. It's shown through your ability to stand still, remain silent, and understand that there are moments when impolite behavior is unacceptable. Number 2. Questions nobody wants to answer. There are questions that are considered perfectly normal social interactions in many parts of the world. Questions about life, work, income, or personal thoughts. But in everyday life in North Korea, this type of question can easily make the other person uncomfortable, even if you don't mean any harm. This isn't legal. There's no rule prohibiting asking questions. But in the culture of communication, people are used to saying safe, general things, and following a pre-established pattern. Therefore, questions that are too direct, too personal, or deviate from the usual conversation are often seen as lacking tact. Just one more question, or trying to delve a little deeper, can quickly change the atmosphere. Voices slow down, answers become shorter, eyes shift. Not because they're angry, but because they're not used to talking outside the established pattern. You might also see them shift the topic to something safer, like the weather, schedules, or general descriptive answers. For many, silence is the safest option. Not because they are thoughtless, but because they have been taught from a young age that there are topics that don't need to be discussed. Questions about personal opinions, life comparisons, or raising differences are often avoided, even when the conversation seems friendly. This can easily lead to misunderstandings. You might think you're just curious and want to connect, but to the locals, that curiosity creates pressure. No one tells you to stop, no one objects, but the conversation will naturally shrink and end sooner. In life in North Korea, communication isn't about talking as much as possible. Sometimes, knowing when to stop, asking fewer questions, and accepting silences is considered the most appropriate behavior. Number 3. Taking photos without permission is prohibited. There are places where simply entering a space automatically prompts you to adjust your behavior, even without any signs. People around you speak more quietly, stand more formally, and walk more slowly. No one tells you what to do, but everyone implicitly understands that this is not a space for casual spontaneity. These rules aren't codified into law, nor are there any lists prohibiting laughter or specific types of photography. However, in daily life, these are considered mandatory norms of conduct. Therefore, when someone deviates from this common rhythm, discomfort usually arises almost immediately. In large squares, monuments, or memorial spaces, loud laughter or behavior as if you're just strolling around is easily perceived as insensitive. To outsiders, it might just be a natural expression of interest during a visit, but to locals, these places carry collective significance and demand seriousness. No one will criticize, but the way people look at you will change noticeably. That feeling is even more pronounced when you raise your camera. Taking photos here isn't just about preserving memories. It also reflects how you perceive the shared space. Joking poses or hastily taken shots can make others uncomfortable. An unwritten rule is that when photographing a monument to a leader, you must capture the entire body. You are absolutely not allowed to crop the image or only take close-ups of the face. It's not because the photo violates the law, but because it suggests disrespect for something considered solemn. People consider these things to be daily habits, so when they see a stranger doing otherwise, the discomfort spreads quickly. The issue isn't whether you're forbidden from doing it, but whether you have the tact to lower your camera at the right moment. Number 4. Striking outfits are not an advantage. Observing daily life in North Korea, you'll easily notice a recurring detail. People often dress quite similarly. It's not because they lack choices, but because similarity creates a sense of security. In public spaces, blending in with the crowd is generally considered the most appropriate behavior. Simply put, the less you deviate, the less attention you'll receive. This isn't written law. There are no regulations dictating what color or style of clothing to wear, but in reality, overly distinctive attire can easily make those around you uncomfortable. No one needs to remind you. Gazes will appear quickly, and the atmosphere can sometimes subtly change. Wearing overly revealing, tight, or flashy clothing is often considered offensive, not necessarily because it's wrong, but because it disrupts the common image that society is accustomed to. Overly fashionable, modern, or unconventional clothing can make the wearer stand out in an undesirable way. The difference becomes even more apparent when clothing features Western lettering, images, or symbols. To outsiders, it's just an ordinary shirt. But in the context of life here, such details are easily perceived as ostentatious or inappropriate for the general environment. Even color and style create boundaries. Too flashy, too contrasting, or too unconventional all draw more attention than necessary. In a society that values order and uniformity, standing out isn't always a positive thing. Sometimes, just one overly bright color amidst muted tones is enough to make you the center of attention. For the locals, dressing isn't just a personal choice. It's a way of showing respect to their surroundings. Therefore, maintaining a neat, modest appearance and avoiding being too different has become a daily habit. Number 5. Personal entertainment can lead to jail. A movie, a song, or a few episodes are readily available on your phone. In many places, that's just your playlist and entertainment library. But in North Korea, those things may no longer be personal preferences. They fall under the category of behaviors that can land a person in serious trouble. Initially, bringing cultural content from outside isn't always seen as dangerous. It might just be a video file, a piece of music, or a few images stored on a personal device. For many, this isn't a big deal, as it's just a habit of using their phone anywhere. But in a system of social control, this is a category of content that receives special attention. According to international reports, possessing or distributing content deemed anti-cultural can lead to years in prison. In cases deemed serious, the sentence can be 15 years, 20 years, or even life imprisonment. For locals, the consequences are often far more severe than for foreigners. The crucial point is that the line is no longer about cultural taboos, but has shifted to criminal prosecution. Storing or sharing such content is considered deviant and detrimental to social order. When discovered, it won't stop at a mere warning. The process usually unfolds quietly. No public arguments, no noisy arrests, just checking equipment, a few short questions, and then detaining the person for questioning. From there, the interrogation or detention can last a very long time. And because it all starts with very small actions like opening the library, viewing file lists, or checking memory, many people only realize the situation has escalated when it's already too late. Number 6. Going alone becomes abnormal. In many cultures, walking alone or turning in a different direction is perfectly normal. You might want to admire another street corner, take another picture, or simply slow down. But in North Korean life, that same action can be interpreted differently. Separating from a group, even for just a few minutes, is often seen as unusual. There are no rules prohibiting you from walking alone, but life operates according to a familiar rhythm. Who goes where, and for how long is usually part of an unspoken order that everyone understands and follows. When that rhythm is broken, the difference becomes immediately apparent. Especially in scheduled activities, changing routes or separating from a group sometimes requires others to explain things on your behalf, and that's something they usually don't want to do. Trouble rarely arises immediately. Initially, it might just be slowing down, turning a different way, or lingering longer than expected. To you, it might just be curiosity, fatigue, or a desire to observe further. But to the observer, it's a departure from the familiar script. When a deviation occurs, what often catches attention isn't the purpose, but the reason. Why did you do things differently? In a context that values collective order, it's the unusual behavior that's most likely to cause concern. Once noticed, that behavior is no longer seen as a simple personal choice. To put it humorously, in many places you might take a detour to buy a bottle of water, but here, people might want to know why you made that detour at that particular moment. Many situations begin with a few short questions or a reminder to return to the group. But if the separation from the group is repeated or prolonged without a clear reason, the level of attention can escalate. Being detained for clarification, verification, or further observation is entirely possible. Number 7. Sitting posture is a measure of good behavior. In everyday life, the human body naturally adjusts to the context. In a formal setting, people naturally sit straighter. In a relaxed setting, their posture becomes more relaxed. But in North Korea, this adjustment is not just a reflex, but a kind of expected, silent language. The way you sit is often seen as a signal. Not a signal of status, but of attitude. When everyone around you maintains a neat posture, sits upright, and places their feet close to the chair, an overly relaxed posture immediately stands out. Crossing your legs, stretching them out in front, or taking up more space than necessary all easily create a sense of deviance from the overall rhythm. What others notice isn't where your feet are placed, but the feeling that you're behaving as if the space doesn't demand seriousness. In an environment where everyone maintains a restrained posture, even an overly casual pose is enough to create a sense of disharmony. And when the overall rhythm is off, the person out of sync is always the first to be noticed. Not because you're wrong, but because you're making yourself the focal point in a frame designed to be free of focal points. Those glances are usually quick and silent. No one says anything, no one makes a clear statement, but the feeling of being watched is real. The initial comfort disappears, replaced by a heavier, more tense atmosphere. To outsiders, this is easily overlooked, but to locals, it's a sign that someone isn't reading the context. Number 8. There are unwritten rules for queuing as well. In everyday life in North Korea, queuing is not just a habit, but more like an operating mechanism of collective order. People stand in straight lines, maintaining adequate distance, and rarely leave their positions once in line. There are no signs reminding people, nor any officially designated guards, but everyone knows where they are and what rhythm they are waiting in. From a distance, the queue sometimes looks like a straight line maintained by habit rather than by regulation. The problem begins when someone fails to read that rhythm. They subtly push ahead, stand off center in line, or inadvertently step into the space between two people. Such movements are easily noticed, not because they cause direct harm, but because they disrupt the order that everyone is trying to maintain. Reactions are usually not verbal. No one shouts, no one publicly reprimands. Instead, there is a brief silence, a quick glance, or a very slight movement to restore the line. Those who disrupt the queue may not realize they've done something wrong, but the feeling of being seen is usually very real. It's worth noting that queuing here isn't just practical, but also an attitude. Maintaining your position is seen as respecting those in front and behind you. Therefore, even a small cut can easily be misinterpreted as impatience or a lack of collective awareness. Sometimes the annoyance isn't directed at the act of cutting, but at the feeling that you're putting yourself ahead of the rest of the queue. Even when the queue is long, people are used to waiting in silence. Showing impatience, constantly looking around, or trying to change positions often annoys others. No one says it out loud, but the difference doesn't disappear. Number 9. Life notes considered abnormal. In many places, jotting down personal thoughts or quickly sketching what one sees is considered harmless. A notebook, a few notes, a quick sketch while waiting for a ride. For creative people, it's simply a way to record experiences. But in North Korea, such actions can be interpreted in a different way. The issue isn't necessarily what you write or draw, it's about what you're recording and why you're recording it. When someone meticulously records details of their surroundings, from the space, people, daily routines to small details others might overlook, that behavior is easily perceived as unusual. Not because it's wrong, but because it's uncommon. Writing a personal diary, sketching on the street, or noting down observations is generally discouraged in public spaces. It gives the impression that you're preserving information rather than simply experiencing it. And in a society that values information control, such keeping easily arouses suspicion. These behaviors aren't explicitly mentioned in written prohibitions. You're not forbidden from carrying a notebook. You're not forbidden from taking notes or sketching. But when it happens in public and is repeated, it starts to attract attention, not through reminders, but through closer observation. From that moment, the act of individual creativity is no longer seen as a harmless habit, but as something that needs clarification. And when clarification begins, every small detail can be questioned. A question often doesn't focus on the art itself, but on the reason, why you're writing, for whom you're writing, and what you intend to do with those notes. Number 10. When a normal question becomes sensitive. In everyday life, many behaviors cause only mild annoyance and then pass. But in North Korea, there's a group of behaviors that cross the line between culture and security. And it often starts very simply, in the way you ask questions and the way you approach others. On paper, there are no laws prohibiting asking questions. You're not forbidden from being curious, nor are you forbidden from conversing with locals. However, society here doesn't operate on a right is fine, wrong is punishable principle, but rather on whether that behavior is considered unusual. A single question is usually fine, but when the question is repeated, delves into personal life, or prompts comparisons to the outside world, the rhythm of the conversation shifts. Not because the content is dangerous, but because it creates a feeling of insecurity. For many locals, answering such questions offers no benefit. On the contrary, it increases risk in ways they can't control. Therefore, the common response isn't a direct refusal, but rather speaking less, giving more general answers, and ending the conversation sooner. The trouble arises when the questioner doesn't recognize these signals. You continue to ask again, or try to connect by digging deeper. At this point, the conversation starts to look different, no longer like a social interaction, but more like an information-gathering process. In North Korea, attention isn't always accompanied by warnings. No one tells you to stop. But being noticed, being observed, or being seen as a disruptive element is entirely possible. And when that line is crossed, the conversation is no longer within the realm of culture. From here, the issue is no longer polite or not, but why are you doing this? Number 11. Accessing the internet can cause problems. In many parts of the world, connecting to the internet is an almost unconscious act. You pick up your phone, and your fingers automatically know what to press. Turn on Wi-Fi, open a browser, type a few words, send a message. But in North Korea, attempting to access the internet freely is not seen as a normal habit. It's a highly sensitive act, as it crosses the line between information. The vast majority of the population only has access to an internal network with tightly controlled content. This isn't a secret, but part of the digital life. Therefore, any action that attempts to go beyond that system, even out of curiosity, is easily perceived as unusual. It's worth noting that you don't even need to successfully access the internet. Simply trying to connect to an international network, experimenting with an unfamiliar device, or opening apps outside of a familiar system can be recorded. In a monitored digital communications environment, the trail left behind isn't necessarily about what you viewed, but rather just the behavior you attempted. Attention doesn't usually come immediately. There are no pop-up notifications, and no one comes to reprimand you on the spot. But when the behavior is repeated or occurs at an inappropriate time, the risk can escalate rapidly. Devices may be inspected, questions begin to arise, and from there, it's no longer a personal matter. For locals, attempting to access the internet outside the established system can have very serious consequences. For outsiders, the risks often include detention, questioning, deportation, or a ban on return. The line here is very thin. Number 12. You need an explanation wherever you go. For many people around the world, leaving a city or moving elsewhere is simply a change of scenery. Today at a familiar spot, tomorrow trying a new neighborhood. But in Pyongyang, movement isn't just about where you go, it's about how you fit into the overall order. Each person usually has a fairly stable routine, where they go to work, when they come home, where they frequent. This stability creates a sense of security for the community because everything is predictable. Therefore, even a short departure from this familiar routine is enough to create a feeling of disharmony. No one stops you along the way, nor is there a direct reprimand, but the difference doesn't disappear on its own. It exists as a small question mark. Where are they going? Why are they there? And in an environment that values stability, such question marks are rarely completely ignored. For locals, traveling far away is not something that happens on a whim. It's linked to a clear reason and a specific plan. Therefore, trips outside of familiar routines easily stand out, even if no one says so. For foreigners living or working in Pyongyang, this feeling is even more pronounced. Travel isn't just a personal decision. It involves the arrangements and responsibilities of those traveling with you. Changing schedules or appearing outside of familiar surroundings can increase attention. And sometimes the hardest thing isn't where you go, but how to make everything seem reasonable and easily explainable. Number 13. The placement of photos must not be arbitrary. In many families around the world, wall-mounted photographs are often purely decorative or commemorative. Whether they are hung high or low, straight or askew, is sometimes just a matter of aesthetics. But in North Korean life, the placement of portraits of leaders is a completely different story. They are not seen as mere decorations, but as part of daily ritual. Portraits are usually placed in the most prominent position in the house, not too low, not obscured, and not placed next to everyday household items. Placing the portrait in the wrong place, askew, or among cluttered belongings is easily perceived as a lack of consideration, though no one says it directly. This isn't a specific law. There are no written rules specifying the correct height or ideal angle. But in daily life, everyone understands that the placement of the photograph reflects the homeowner's attitude. A photograph placed too low, near the floor, near the bed, or in places considered undignified can be offensive to others. Not only the location, but also the condition of the photograph is important. A dusty, bent edge, faded, or uncleaned photograph is easily perceived as careless. In many families, checking and cleaning photographs is a regular habit, not because of reminders, but because it's considered a matter of course. Just as some families always clean their altars according to a schedule, photographs are treated as something to be kept clean and tidy. It's noteworthy that judgment doesn't usually come from a specific individual. It comes from the collective perception of the community. When someone enters a house and sees a photograph placed in a way that doesn't conform to familiar norms, discomfort quickly arises, even if no one comments, and sometimes that very silence is the clearest signal that you've just violated an unspoken norm. Number 14. Don't be absent for too long. In many places, participation in community activities is a matter of choice. If you're busy, you're absent. If you don't like it, you don't. But in North Korean life, repeated absences are often interpreted differently. They don't create controversy or provoke public complaints, but they are easily noted, albeit subtly. Community activities are usually simple: collective cleaning, regular meetings, or short community gatherings. No one demands enthusiasm or excessive attention. The most important thing is often presence. Being present means you're still in the rhythm, still have a name in the shared space, and are still functioning like everyone else. Sometimes, just showing up for a moment, standing in line, doing a few small things, is enough to keep things running smoothly. When someone consistently doesn't show up, rarely is there any public reproach, but that absence doesn't disappear. It becomes a small, recurring void. In a close-knit environment, this type of void is easily remembered. Not participating isn't inherently wrong. There's no rule requiring you to be present all the time. But communal living is built on regular appearances. When you're absent for too long, the connection weakens, and feelings of isolation begin to form. For many, absence is simply a desire for quiet or to avoid disruption. But for the community around you, prolonged silence creates unspoken questions. Are you busy, avoiding something, or isolating yourself from the group? No one asks directly, but those questions persist. And the less information available, the more likely people are to speculate in the safest way possible. Number 15. When greeting, there's also an appropriate level. In many places, greeting neighbors is simply a matter of polite social etiquette. A greeting is fine, but not greeting isn't considered a big deal. However, in North Korean life, the way you greet someone and the degree of closeness or distance are interpreted as social signals. Neighborly relationships here typically have a very clear, just right level. A brief greeting is exchanged. A few short exchanges are made. Questions are generally polite, not overly cold, but not overly familiar either. Maintaining this distance helps things run smoothly because everyone knows their place in the relationship. Problems arise when someone deviates from that just right. Not greeting for extended periods can be perceived as distant or unapproachable. Conversely, being too familiar, asking too many questions, visiting frequently, or showing excessive curiosity about someone's life can make neighbors uncomfortable. The discomfort isn't due to your concern, but rather because that concern forces others to explain, react, and remain more vigilant. This discomfort is rarely expressed directly. It usually manifests itself in subtle signals. Conversations become shorter. Eye contact is avoided. The atmosphere is more reserved. There is no conflict, no arguments, but the relationship becomes strained in a quiet way. It is noteworthy that in close proximity, small changes in greetings are often noticed very quickly. Today you don't greet, tomorrow you avoid each other, or suddenly you are overly outgoing. These details don't disappear, they are remembered. So, you've just explored 15 taboos and cultural boundaries in North Korea, not to scare you, but to understand why a seemingly modern place still operates according to its own unique rules. If these perspectives helped you see North Korea differently, please like to support the channel. Share this video with anyone planning a trip there to avoid unnecessary trouble. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue exploring little-known aspects of countries around the world. Of the 15 things, which one surprised you the most? Leave a comment. I'd love to read your perspective.